This is episode 295 of the Beyond the Food Show, and today we're going to talk about undieting your life and what it means. Why is undieting or eating isn't enough? And trust me, this is going to get interesting because I'm going to talk about how I'm undieting parts of my life right now. Ready? Stay tuned. Welcome to the Going Beyond the Food Show. I'm Stephanie Dozier, clinical nutritionist and creator of the Going Beyond the Food method. And after a 25-year dieting career that started at the age of 12, I decided to say hell no to diet culture and undiet my life. It is now my mission to help women undiet their life. If you're new to our podcast, be sure to grab our free podcast roadmap at stephaniedozier.com/roadmap. Ready, sisters? Let's do this. Hello, sisters. Welcome back. And I hope you're doing well. I have a story that I want to start this podcast with. So if you are listening to this podcast right now, know that I'm recording for the first time ever live on Instagram at the same time, because this podcast is being recorded at the very last minute. And there's a reason for that. I hosted a masterclass yesterday. So when I say yesterday, let's put some time in. We're today right now, October 7, 2021. So I hosted a live masterclass yesterday, and the Q&A part of that masterclass at the end was on fire. I coach women in this free masterclass. They're not clients of ours, they're just students wanting to learn from me for 45 minutes. And I coach on such powerful topic with such great question. And one of the listener of the masterclass asked me this question, and it stumped me. And I'll tell you why. So here's a question. She asked me, Stephanie, what does it mean to undiet your life? And I was stumped. Not because I didn't know the meaning of undieting your life, but instead that after 6 weeks of rebranding our message, new visual, new messages, new podcast cover, you probably noticed, our message wasn't clear. So I took this question and I asked myself deeper question. Now, you have to know the growth in myself to be able to do that because, 8 years ago, somebody would have asked me this question about a business I was building, and I would have took it personally. I would have taken it as, oh my God, you're doing your job well, your branding is not efficient. I would have used this question to beat the crap out of me. But that was another day. 8 years ago, I have now a different way of managing my mind and thinking differently. So I took this question as a learning opportunity and understanding how is our message about our new brand, Undieting Your Life, isn't clear. And just a heads up, if you're new to my world, know that we have two branches to our company. We have what you're hearing right now and listening to, which is Undiet Your Life, which is a consumer business for the average population, for the typical North American woman who is wanting to change her relationship to food and body. But we also have another branch of our business, which is professional training and mentoring. So up to 6 weeks ago, both of those businesses reside under Going Beyond the Food. And part of our growth as a business was to separate these two brands and have them lived individually. So, by the way, if you are a professional listening to Going Beyond the Food podcast, know that going forward, we will never talk about professional topic on this podcast because we have a new podcast. Yeah, you may not know this, but we have a new podcast called Undiet Your Coaching Practice, which is the first podcast in the world designed, created, and hosted specifically for non-diet practitioner and coaches. So it's available right now. If you go on your podcast app and you type in the keyword Undiet Your Coaching, boom, our podcast will appear. So anyway, a lot of background to say that we have now two different entities, Undiet Your Life and Undiet Your Coaching Practice. And this question from the student was in the population of you listening, right? Just the average person, woman, wanting to change our relationship to food and body. So it got me thinking, and I decided to record a podcast on this. So here we are today, 5 minutes in, and I'm going to answer that question the way that I answered it on the Masterclass, because I want to clarify what it means to undiet your life and why it's not just about the food. And I think this is a very important topic because I'm seeing more and more women who have done the journey of learning intuitive eating, but they're stuck. Like, they're realizing that they're thinking, and this was this lady on the Masterclass, she thought, well, there you go again. Something is wrong with me because I read this amazing book, Intuitive Eating, but I'm still struggling in so many parts of my life. So even if I'm at peace with food, I'm still struggling everywhere else. Like, this isn't supposed to be this way. And I'm here to say, just focusing on food is not going to be this widespread fixing everything in your life approach. And there's some good reason for that. And that's what I want to get into. And I think defining the concept of undieting your life will help you appreciate that. So here we go. Undieting your life, first and foremost, doesn't mean stopping dieting. Although stopping dieting is the first step of undieting your life, it is not the end point. Undieting your life is about restoring your autonomy to feed yourself. Undieting your life is about claiming back your power over your own body. And undieting your life is about dismantling how diet culture has impacted your mind, your value, and your belief system, which is leading you to think thoughts that actually create the reality in your life beyond the food that you don't enjoy. So undieting your life has kind of three planes: food, body, and what's going on in your mind. Undieting your life is about stage one, unlearning. And I want to give you an analogy here. And a lot of you, if not all of you, will relate to this. I want you to remind or go back in your memory and go back to the first ever diet you did. First ever. I know my first diet on my own without my mom was at 15 years old. And I remember clearly struggling with dieting and this whole controlling food and cooking food back in those days was low fat ways, like cooking low fat and having to count calories. Back in the days, you had a little booklet and you had to measure food and calorie. Like, it was complicated. I had to learn to diet. But guess what? When we undiet our life, we need to unlearn in the same way we had to learn to diet. We need to unlearn diet culture. We have to unlearn the false definition of health. We have to unlearn food restriction. We have to unlearn what it means to have a body as a woman. And we need to unlearn the oppressive socialization that we have internalized as a woman. Right? All these thought pattern and thought process, like the good girl syndrome, right? So podcast 249, if you have not listened to all my podcasts, go back 249, the good girl syndrome. But high level here, the good girl syndrome is what we as women are trained to be, right? To place value on other people's opinion more than our own, right? So we're constantly seeking approval. We're taught that we are less valuable as a woman if we don't meet external expectation that others have for us. And that perfection is the gateway to acceptance and worthiness. And these thoughts, these ways of understanding what it means to be a woman affects every part of our life. So that's what we need to unlearn, and then we need to relearn, right? So undieting our life is about learning how to break free from the path that has stolen our overall sense of freedom, of confidence, of peace, and finding the way back to our self, our true self. Although the path right now that you are living into, you are experiencing, may present itself with food obsession and overeating and binging and feeling uncomfortable in your body and the self-critical thoughts, these are just symptoms. These are the things we see on the outside. And here's an analogy for that. It's like any disease in your body. Take fever for an example, right? So fever, the quote condition of having a fever, will present itself as sweating, as having chills, headache, muscle ache, irritability, high bodily temperature. But these are just symptoms of a much bigger situation going on in your body. Like under those external symptoms, there's a much bigger issue. Your immune system is hard at work fighting a virus, fighting a bacteria that's invading your body. In other words, your entire body is on the defensive and it's working hard to protect you and to keep you alive. That's the same thing that is happening when it comes to undieting. We tend to fixate on the food behavior or the body image, and we miss the real threatening problem underneath it all, the infection, the bacteria, the virus. That infection, that bacteria, that virus, when it comes to undieting our life, is diet culture, right? That and all that socialization, that the internalization that we have unbeknown to us integrated in our life, and that runs all the places in our life that we don't feel satisfied with. Diet culture is the virus, we'll call it the virus, but it's the entire belief system that we integrated and that allows patriarchy to be upheld in our society. Diet culture is a system of oppression, right? It's a tool, one of the many tools that patriarchy use in order to ensure that women stay in their, quote, place. The virus is all that conditioning that diet culture and patriarchy shape our minds. It's literally, as women, shape our minds and our pattern of thinking and our nervous system. But we don't see that because that's invisible. What we see is the food behavior and the bodily dissatisfaction, and we target those, right? Like my example, the student on the Masterclass who couldn't comprehend why it was more than food and why just reading the book of intuitive eating wasn't enough. And that's the piece we're missing in our industry right now. That's why we move from going beyond the food, because I don't think the message was clear enough, to Undiet Your Life, to really see it as, call it a life coaching program more than just an intuitive eating program. Because I have been doing this for longer than most people in the industry, I have taken the approach of only focusing on food, and I've seen what it does, that it keeps people a few years later coming back and saying, but it just wasn't enough. And that's how Undieting Your Life came up, because I want to get to the root of it, to the conditioning that is shaping, as women, our everyday thoughts well beyond the food. And let me give you some example, just to, again, really situate that, and you can connect to this, right? The way in which diet culture impacts beyond the food and the body can look like you at work not applying for the position that you want or you think you deserve, or asking for the increase that you know you deserve, right? Diet culture will show up as an all or nothing thinking that leads many women to sit on the sideline instead of chasing their dream, the partner they want to have, the career they want, living the life they want to live under their own term. Because we're like, if we're not perfect, we can't do it, right? And it creates this despair in our life that will never be, quote, good enough, that will never figure out how to do things right or good enough in order for us to get what we want. So that's how I see Undieting Your Life, is going beyond the food and beyond the body to go and give you tools to change this conditioning. And that's why it needs to be rooted in education, right? And that's part of our program. It's always been education based, but it's even stronger now. It's called Undiet Your Life course, because we need to educate ourselves. We need to learn the things that patriarchy and diet culture never freaking taught us, right? There's missing point in our education on purpose. And we need to know these things so we can take back, quote, the control of our life and do what the heck we want to do. We need to learn how our brain works so we can untangle this mess, patterns of thinking and social conditioning, so we can then realign, right? And do, chase, be who we want to be. So education has to be part of this. Understanding how your human brain works has to be part of this. Learning the 10 principles of intuitive eating is part of it, but it's not the end point, because it doesn't give you the tool to untangle the mess of diet culture beyond food or beyond the body image. I'm going to tell you a story. I told you at the beginning of the podcast that I would give you a story or share a story on how this applies in my life. So, as probably a lot of you are expecting, my relationship to food and body is things that I've been working on for years now, and they're in a great place. The one element of my life I'm working on right now is my relationship to exercise. And forever, my relationship to movement and exercise has been about two things: losing weight and performing. But over the last few years, I started to have a mobility issue and pain. Again, background story, I have a scoliosis, a curvature of my spine, which exposed me to more pain in my lower back than the average person. So I have been having a lot of pain, a lot of mobility issue, and I've been sitting on that pain and that mobility issue because I had other priorities in my life. I had other things that I was working on. I was working on food, and I was working on my mindset, and I was working on my business, and all these things are wonderful now, right? My relationship to food is back to normal. I am at a stage of body liberation where I am in my body. I respect my body. I use my body to liberate other women. And the same with my business. I mean, business is booming and growing and things are going well. But exercise wasn't. And I had a goal personally to go back on stage. I am a trained public speaker from my past career. And I've had this vision, this dream for us collectively to have public event. Now, that dream has been for the last 2 to 3 years. And the pandemic came in and took a back burner. But I'm hosting that dream within me that as this movement of the non-diet approach grows in women's liberation, we will come together in groups for live event. It's either a retreat or a retreat in different places in the world or cruises, right? Places where we can come together, spend time together, be with like-minded women, grow and inspire each other. Wouldn't that be cool? I would love to hear from you if you think this is something we should do. But if I'm the host of those events, I need to be able to do public speaking. And my issue is not to stand in front of the crowd, is my lower back and my hip pain to be able to stand for hours at a time. So I knew that I was at that point where my body, my ability to use my body, the restraint that my body had could not make this dream possible. So the why that motivated and inspired me to take the next step in my journey with moving my body, exercise, and taking care of the structural part of my body became stronger and stronger. My why for the first time in my life wasn't about weight loss or performance, but it was about realizing a dream that was really important to me. So over the last 10 months, I went to work. I went to work in changing my thoughts about moving my body, changing how I think when I move my body, because that was a whole chapter in itself. I realized there was a lot of self-critical thought as I moved my body. And I hired a coach. In French, we call them kinesiologists or physical, I think in English, they're called physical therapists. Somebody who's educated in the structural function of the body and how to move a body and to repair the structural aspect of the body to be able to move. And we've been working together for 10 months now. And I'm committed to work with her so that I can realize this other dream of creating these live events for women to come together and continue to dismantle diet culture globally at a higher scale by creating those live events. But in order for that to happen, I had to unlearn and relearn a completely different relationship to movement. And I needed help with that. And that's why I hired the professional that I'm working on. So the reason why I'm saying this to you is, what is your why? Just like this person on the Masterclass yesterday, right? She's been sitting on the sideline working on her relationship to food. And although she's listening to the podcast, and she's probably listening right now, she heard me talk about like going beyond the food, but it wasn't resonating with her. It wasn't clear. And it felt big. It felt like this huge undertaking that she wasn't attracted or motivated to take. And so my question to her and to you, if that's you, and to me, I had to ask myself, like, what is my why? What is my why that's going to fuel the effort I'm going to need to put in to unlearn how diet culture impacted my relationship to bodily movement and to relearn, to go, because it's effort, people. Like, it's effort to do the taught work. It's effort to manage your mind through the movement session that you're working with your coach. It's effort to change the way I'm doing my schedule so I can move my body with this person on Zoom. Like, it's effort. In order to fuel these effort to do the work to unlearning and relearning, the why has to be solid enough and big enough. So I'm going to leave you with that. Like, if you're hearing this message of Undieting Your Life and you're like, yes, that makes sense, but you're sitting on the sideline, go back and try to clean up your why or find a new why it's important to you. And if you didn't come to the masterclass yesterday, know that this masterclass will go on a recording format so that you can listen to it at any time. It was that good, okay? And there was a workbook that was along to the workshop, and in it I shared an inventory checklist that the student had to do to determine how wide diet culture had impacted their life. Something I created a few years ago that I use with our student in our program, but I took it out and I put it part of this masterclass. So depending when you're listening to this podcast, go to the show note and you can get the recording of this masterclass. You'll get the workbook and you can do the process while watching me teach live. So I'm going to close this podcast and I'm going to acknowledge one thing. I'm very passionate about the concept of undieting our life. And the reason why I am so passionate is because I want us collectively to have the upper hand on diet culture. I want us to be able to detect the conditioning of oppressive system like diet culture from a mile away and know how to remain in our power. I want us collectively to change the future for the next generation of women so that they do not have to unlearn. They do not have to do this work of unlearning. And for that to happen, we need to lead. We need to model acceptance in all parts of our life so that they learn watching us being acceptant of who we are. That's why I'm so passionate about undieting your life. I hope this podcast helped you understand the concept of undieting your life. And please, if I wasn't clear, send us a message, reach out to me on social media, and I'll do another podcast to make sure that I'm explaining it in a different way or using different analogies so that I can express what's in my mind more clearly so everyone or more women can understand this. Until next time, I love you, sister, and I'll see you on the next podcast. Beyond ready to shed diet culture from your life and become the expert at your own body? Awesome. Then you need to join Undiet Your Life program. Go to stephaniedodier.com/join and join us now. Undiet Your Life is the first program of its kind with the unique combination of mindset, life coaching with intuitive eating and body image. Find your freedom, reclaim your power, and take control of your time so you can refocus on what really matters to you. Join Undiet Your Life at stephaniedodier.com/join, and I'll see you on the other side.